Hey class, welcome to chapter 15, section 5, Ending the War. Let's wrap this thing up. So as the war's coming to an end, Grant just continued to pound Lee and his men. Grant was so well equipped with men and supplies. Remember all of those advantages that we talked about early on about how the industry, the factories were in the north, how the north had so many more people, these immigrants coming in, people able and willing to fight. The north's advantages outweighed the south's advantages of having greater military minds. And so, despite the north, that's right, the north, taking on heavy casualties, it didn't matter. They had so many men to replace the guys that were dying. And they just kept pounding Lee, and he just didn't have the men to keep up. And the Confederate Army was finally forced to retreat. And then finally, General Sheridan came up, blocked the Confederate armies led by Johnston and Lee. Grant is there. Lee attempted to make one final stand at the Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, and that final stand failed. And General Robert E. Lee, pictured here talking to Grant in the Appomattox Courthouse, is forced to surrender. The South surrenders April 9th, 1865, 4 years to the month that the war began. Just to give you a quick visual again of where that took place, here is Appomattox in southern Virginia. Remember, Vicksburg, this is where Grant finally secures the Mississippi. Then we had men like Sheridan, right, pushing them all the way down to Savannah, then marching back up. Lee had made one strong push up to Antietam and Gettysburg before being stopped and pushed back, and finally forced to surrender here at Appomattox, ending the war April 9th, 1865. War is so devastating to our nation because everyone that died, of course, was an American. But let's talk about some of the results of this war. Slavery gets abolished. Slavery is gone. The federal government has supreme authority. It's not the states. There's no question anymore. The federal government has it. Both sides lose thousands of young men. The northern economy booms. They're making military equipment. They're thriving. While the southern economy is devastated. Number 6, the Union. The United States of America is reunited. You can see this map here in the top right shows America as one united nation. Following the war, no Confederacy, it is done. Unfortunately, a nation can come together, but it does not heal the hearts and attitudes between the North and the South. There will be a divisiveness, especially in the South, a bitterness in the South. Let's look to at how destructive this war was. Here are total deaths. Over 350,000 northern deaths. About 250 southern deaths. So we're well over 600,000 people died. Approximately 1/3 of the approximate 2 million men who served in the war were either killed, injured, or captured. Nearly every family lost at least one family member or close friend. In the South, 1/4 of all men of draft age, and let me tell you, draft age was 18 to 50. Nearly 1/4 of all of them never returned home. Other costs of the war, the physical destruction for the South. Remember, the wars fought in the South. They had home field advantage, but it's going to hurt them in the end because their area gets destroyed. Railroads, roads, farms, industrial plants, the ones they had, get crushed. The North's going to spend $6.2 billion, the South $2.1 billion, and major inflation. Inflation is the cost that goods go up. 80% in the North, 9 1,000% rate in the South. We'll talk about that in class because those numbers are staggering. But of course, the hardest numbers to swallow are the number of human lives lost in this war. The war ends April 9th, 1865. And of course, in a very, very sad state of affairs, 5 days later, April 4th, 1865, President Lincoln gets assassinated. It is Good Friday, and Lincoln goes to the theater with his wife. This is his press secretary at Ford's Theater. It's a couple blocks from the White House. While at Ford's Theater, John Wilkes Booth, a familiar face around the theater. He was an actor, but he was a Confederate sympathizer. It was not strange to see him there. He snuck up behind the theater, appeared at the president's booth, came inside, shot Lincoln at near point-blank range. This is what the theater booth where Lincoln sat looked like back then and how it looks today. This was the president's booth, which is why it was established the way it was. Lincoln was rushed out of there and brought across the street to the Peterson House, a house owned by a family. Here is the bed he died on. That bed is still there today for visitors to see, and he is dead. So 5 days after the end of the war, Lincoln gets assassinated. A train would take Lincoln's body to his hometown of Springfield, Illinois, to be buried. John Wilkes Booth would, of course, get hung for his actions. Civil War is over. America's reunited, but a very heavy cost in lives of so many Americans, including President Lincoln.